Hello, everybody. I'm sad I don't get to see you in person this year to do the presentation, but I am excited that I still get to bring this presentation to you. So we're going to go ahead and get started. My name is Jacob Stengel. I'm a captain on our fire prevention division. I am currently at a working fire station, so that means you may hear some noise in the background. If we do get any calls, I'm not going to have to leave, but just be warned, you might hear some noise. I am a public educator. That means that, so my role in the fire department is a little bit different. I don't ride on the trucks. I don't necessarily respond to emergencies. And my main job is I am a public educator. That means I teach people how to be safe. So there's a couple different ways at the fire department that we help our community. One is we react to bad things that have already happened. So a fire happens, we react to it, we put the fire out. The other way that we help our community is we take more of a proactive approach, and we try to prevent bad things from happening. And so that's what my job is. That's why I work in fire prevention. Not only do we try to prevent fires, we try to prevent injuries and really anything bad from happening to people that live here. Also a fire investigator, and that just means that I investigate myself or one of our other fire investigators. We investigate every fire that happens in Edmond. So I get to see firsthand what actually causes fires. I'm also a fire inspector, so I'm familiar with the codes, and I really like learning about historic fires, and so I'm excited to bring this presentation to you. Now, since I'm not there in person with you, you might be wondering what I actually look like. And yes, this is an actual photo of me, so just keep that for reference. In case we do get a real fire today, we need to talk about what to do, because it is possible. So the main thing is stay calm. Go to the nearest exit, immediately exit the building. Always know a second way out. Notify 911, make sure everybody made it out safely, and remember, stay calm. But hopefully that's not going to happen today. So let's get started. How many people have a reasonable expectation that you are safe in a public building? So whether you go to a grocery store, you go to a movie theater, a Thunder game, and I know that we can't do some of those things right now because of COVID, but how many of you expect that you're going to be safe while you're inside the building? Well, count me in. I expect to be safe. I expect to leave there without getting hurt, injured, or killed. And I think that's a reasonable expectation for us to have here in 2021. But that hasn't always been the case for people. And we're going to learn today that unfortunately a lot of people have had to die so that we can feel safe today. So let's talk a little bit about the history of fire. I always like to ask people, do you think fire is good or bad? And it's not a trick question. So we've had fire since the beginning of mankind. Fire can be used for good. I love a good campfire and some s'mores. And to me, that is a good thing. Fire, it creates warmth. I can cook my food on it, right? It's used for good. We also know that fire can be misused for bad. And when I say misused for bad, that could be intentionally, someone purposely setting something on fire, or it could be accidentally. And most, like house fires and fires that we're going to talk about today, they occurred accidentally, but really bad things resulted from them. And since you guys aren't here with me today, I'm going to have to kind of imagine what questions you would be asking. And right now, you guys might be thinking, what is this guy talking about? I thought we were going to be talking about building and fire codes and historical fires. Well, we are. You just got to bear with me just a minute because we got to learn a little bit about fire first. So let's talk about the fire codes. Now, what are fire codes? Well, fire codes that we have today are basically the result of historical events that resulted in either a lot of people dying or a lot of money being lost because property was destroyed. The fire department enforces the fire codes, so we enforce them here in Edmond. So let's go back in time, and you may be thinking now, well, okay, we've got all these historic fires. Where did these happen at? Well, I'm glad you asked. So let's go back to 64 AD to the town of Rome. So this fire, very controversial. Some believe it was started by Emperor Nero. It hasn't been confirmed. It's more of a conspiracy theory, I guess you could say. But it's a widely held belief among scholars. So it burned for 6 entire days, destroyed 2/3 of the entire town of Rome. And this fire occurred, one of the reasons why it burned up so much. So back then, they did not have fire departments. So fires basically burned until they burned out. There was no putting them out really. And the reason this fire burned up so much of the town is they had really narrow streets, everything was close together, and they had combustible building materials. That just means things that could catch fire. So imagine a house or a building built out of wood versus a building made out of stone. Which one is going to be able to resist fire? The one made out of stone, right? So Rome was smart. They learned, they said, hey, we're going to rebuild and we're going to make wider streets. And instead of using wood, we're going to use stone to make our building. So one thing to keep in mind and to pay attention to as we go through each of these fires is whether or not they learn from it. Rome was smart. They did learn from it. Let's fast forward to somebody who didn't learn from it. And that's going to be the Great Fire of London, 1666 AD. I believe the fire started in a bakery, consumed 13,000 houses, 87 churches. And the important thing on this one, it destroyed the homes of 70,000 of the city's 80,000 residents. Now, Edmond is a little bit bigger than 80,000 people. Imagine a fire that burned through our town and destroyed the homes of 7 out of every 8 people. It's unbelievable to think about that happening today, but these type of fires did happen. So in London, they had ideas for change, but they didn't implement them. They just built it exactly the same. And they failed to learn from the fire, which is very tragic because so many people lost their homes and they didn't learn anything from it. So, okay, right now, you guys are thinking, I get it, firefighter Jacob. This happened in other countries, but we live in America and we're better than that, right? Well, I wish I could tell you that we didn't have historical fires and lots of property loss and people dying. But unfortunately, that's not the case. And we're going to talk about some of the most significant ones. Now, I will say, in America, we take very seriously the loss of life, especially the loss of life of a lot of people, and we do learn from them. And that's the main thing we're going to learn today. So fire codes have changed a lot, and so has the firefighter. And I'm personally thankful that we have a lot of the technology that we do today. Can anybody tell me who this man right here is? He established the very first volunteer fire department. I'm going to give you guys some trivia stuff today. And this is one. 1736. Let me help you out. Do you know who it is now? That's right, Mr. Benjamin Franklin in Philadelphia, Pennsylvania, established the Union Fire Company. They didn't have fire trucks back then, so what they used was bags, baskets, buckets. They filled them with water and they threw them on the fire. As you can imagine, not very efficient, but still better than just letting the fire burn out. Now, how about this, gentlemen? Does anybody know who this is? I would hope that you do, because that is George Washington. Another piece of trivia, he served in the Alexandria Fire Department. Not only did he serve, he himself bought an entire fire engine in 1775. And this is a picture of the fire engine. Doesn't look like much now. Didn't even have an engine on it. It was drawn by horses and had a pump on it that was used by people. And they pumped the water. Didn't have a whole lot of pressure, but much better than buckets. Let's talk about some of the historical fires in America. So one of the most significant ones is the Great Chicago Fire, October 8th, 1871. It's a very famous fire because it's believed to have started by a cow named Betsy, which some of you may have heard that before. It started in a barn. High winds and buildings made out of wood made the fire spread really quick. This fire burned until it ran out of fuel. They were not able to stop it. As you can imagine, a fire of this magnitude, even with today's firefighting technology, would be extremely difficult for us to stop, and there's just no way that they could do it with the technology that they had at this time. 1/3 of the buildings were destroyed. 1 in every 3 person was left homeless. Absolutely devastating. And 300 people died. So did Chicago learn from it? Yes, they did. They did a great job of learning from it. The city council banned wooden building materials and required flame-resistant materials instead. And many people believe that Chicago would not have grown and be the great city that it is today if they had not had this original fire. Because what happened is they were able to rebuild the town, and they built it with non-combustible things like steel and metal. And many of the skyscrapers that they have today, they wouldn't have had they continued to build everything out of wood, because steel is much stronger. So they also developed some codes for building and street spacing. Chicago was smart. They learned from it. So that was a fire that occurred in an entire town. And so now we're going to talk about some fires that occurred in individual buildings. And because at this time, early 1900s, we've started to develop fire codes to prevent fires from spreading, and we're starting to get fire departments and fire trucks. December 30th, 1903, the Iroquois Theater fire. This theater was believed to be fireproof. And tell me if you've heard a similar story before. Think the Titanic. The Titanic was believed to be unsinkable. Well, we know how that story ended. And unfortunately, it's going to be the same for the Iroquois Theater. It was believed to be fireproof because it was made out of stone. Now, they were correct. That stone is not going to burn. But what they didn't take into account was what the building was filled with, and that is lots of things that can catch fire. No sprinklers and no fire alarms because it's fireproof. We don't need those things, right? It's never going to catch fire. Unfortunately, a stage light sparked and ignited a curtain. They did have exit doors. In fact, they had 30 of them. Some of them opened inward, but the main thing is 27 of the 30 exit doors were blocked. And a very common recurrence that we're going to see over these next few fires is improperly functioning exit doors. It's one of the most common fire code violations that we still encounter in 2021 is blocked exit doors. So 602 people died. Does anybody remember how many died in the Great Chicago Fire? It was 300. So over twice as many people died in this small building versus a fire that occurred that wiped out a third of a town. This is the single deadliest building fire in American history. Did they learn from this one? They did. Fire codes were developed to introduce something called panic bars. Got a picture of them right here. If you will notice, in places that we call assemblies, that means there's more than like 50 people that will be in a building. You're going to see these things on the doors. And that just means that when people are in a panic, there's nothing special they have to do to the door. They don't have to turn any locks. You simply press on that bar and the door opens. That is a fire code. And it's also not required to use more than 30 pounds of force to open it. You shouldn't have to put your body weight into it. If that is the case, then that is also a fire code violation. They also decided that they were going to enforce maximum seating capacities. The Iroquois Theater, they crammed as many people as they could into that fire, or into that building. Ventilation standards were changed. They also developed regulations to clear exit pathways and mark exit doors that are open and easy to unlock. So if you think about going to a movie theater today, the stairs are lighted up, and if the fire alarm goes off, it would light up even more, and you'd be able to see to safely exit. Triangle Shirtwaist Fire. And you guys probably could tell me more about this than I know about it since you've been studying it. But it is a very fascinating case study. March 25th, 1911, fire started on the 8th floor. So one thing to keep in mind is fire codes at this point do exist. Unfortunately, building owners and people that build the buildings, they will get around some of the fire codes legally, but they get around them. And that happened in this case. So the fire codes at that time required, if you had a building that was 11 stories or taller, you had to have stone floors. If it was 10 or less, you could have wood floors. Now, why would somebody choose wood floors over stone floors? Because the wood floors are obviously going to be less safe if there's a fire. Well, the answer is money, and it's almost always money. To save money, they only built it to 10 stories, so they could put wooden floors versus the more expensive stone floors. And that decision cost a lot of people their lives. There was no fire alarm on the 9th floor, and the workers on the 10th floor were notified by telephone. And this fire started on the 8th floor. Does fire, smoke, and heat go up or down? That's right, it goes up. And because of that, floors 8, 9, and 10, those were the ones where the people died in. Remember we talked about exits being blocked or locked? Well, not only were some exits blocked, they were actually locked. There was really deplorable working conditions here, and their workers were basically imprisoned. They were locked inside to make sure that they weren't stealing time or taking breaks when they weren't supposed to. So a fire inspection had actually recommended some changes be made, but they were not made. The fire escape had a 2-story drop-off, and the fire department in New York did not have a ladder that reached beyond the 7th floor. And remember, this fire occurred on the 8th floor. They could not even reach the people. Another little piece of trivia is the tallest building in Edmond is 8 stories tall. We have an agreement that we have to have a fire truck with a ladder that will reach that tall. So we actually have a fire truck that has a ladder that's over 100 feet tall, so it will reach every single building in the city of Edmond. 146 people died in this fire. The Triangle Shirtwaist Fire is unique, not only because they learned from it, but it wasn't just fire codes that were impacted. It was human rights and women's rights were also impacted, and workplace regulations. So yes, they did do fireproofing and sprinkler systems. They developed a Bureau of Fire Protection, which is sort of the division that I would work in now. They didn't really have those before this fire. They developed workplace regulations to make workplaces safer, to give equal rights to men and women in the workplace. In the Triangle Shirtwaist, there was many children that were employed. And so they created child labor laws. And also they had workers' compensation that says that it'll take care of you if you are hurt or killed while you're working at your job. So a lot of very good things did result from this fire, which is a good thing, because if 146 people died, it would be tragic if nothing good happens as a result of that. We're going to fast forward a little bit more to 1942, Coconut Grove nightclub fire. The fire department had inspected this nightclub just 8 days before the tragic fire. They did have an occupancy rating. They were told you can only have 600 people in here. Remember we talked about how money talks? Well, bars, clubs, they have occupancy ratings, but sometimes they will choose to violate those to sell more tickets, to sell more drinks, to sell more food. And that's what they did there. Occupancy rating of 600, they had 1,000 people in there. Look how crowded that is. It's insane. A match started the fire in the basement. They had one stairwell with an exit, and it was blocked within only 2 minutes. A lot of people think you're going to have a lot of time to get out of the fire. This fire shows that is not the case, and we're going to see one that even more emphasizes this. Within 5 minutes, the entire building was involved in fire. And in 12 minutes, the fire was out. It only lasted 12 minutes. But 492 people died, mostly because they couldn't safely, or they weren't able to exit the building. 200 people alone died at the revolving doors at the front of the building. So they died at the exit door. 200 people. How did they learn from this? They developed outward swinging doors. Next time you're in a public building, even your school, notice how the exit doors, if they have an exit sign above it, the door swings out away from you. So you don't have to pull it back in to exit the building. They required fire suppression systems and revolving doors. A lot of people don't know this because you probably have never had to do it, but if a building catches fire and the revolving doors don't work for some reason, all you have to do is press on them, and they have a hinge, and they'll hinge open. So they operate like a normal door. They also required the use of emergency lighting. Another big problem in this is that the power went off, and people just could not see how to get out. So now at exits, they actually have emergency lights that come on even when the electricity goes off. The emergency lights will come on, and they will last for 90 minutes on battery alone. Another thing that occurred with this fire is they had fake palm trees inside that were very flammable. So they made fire codes that say if you have things inside of these type of buildings, they have to be fire resistant or fireproof. So I get it, guys. This is sad, but you don't work at a shirtwaist factory and you don't go to nightclubs. And I'm glad. Now, some of you may want to wear a shirtwaist, and that's a whole different topic, and we're not going to get into that today. But there are some things that I know that you do that there have been historic fires that occurred, and one of those would be school. 1958, Our Lady of Angels school fire. Largest loss of life fire at a school in American history. They did not have a sprinkler at the school because of what's called some people call it grandfather clause. That just means that when the building was built, they weren't required to have a fire sprinkler. If it was built today, it would be required, but they only enforced the fire codes at the time it was built. The fire extinguishers were mounted over 7 feet off the ground, which is way too tall for kids to reach, and honestly even too tall for some adults to reach because they can be kind of heavy. They only had one fire escape from the second floor. This fire started in the basement in a cardboard trash barrel, and sadly, several years later, a kid that went to the school admitted to starting the fire in the stairs. They believed that it burned for about 30 minutes before it was discovered. The students sadly weren't able to escape to the fire escape and just really to get out of the building. This was at a Catholic school, and they had very strict rules about leaving the classroom. In fact, the teachers and students were not all allowed to leave the classroom unless they had permission from basically the principal. It's like the head nun. And there were severe punishments if they broke that rule, if they left the classroom without having permission. And some of the teachers reported after the fire that one of the reasons that they didn't leave is because they were scared they were going to get in trouble, and they didn't know if it was a real fire or not, and if they were allowed to actually leave. And so nowadays, if you hear the fire alarm, you get out. You don't need permission from anyone to leave the building. And unfortunately, because of that rule, a lot of people died because they were just scared to actually leave their rooms. So some jumped from up to 25 feet high windows. The firefighters got the wrong directions, and they also encountered a locked gate and weren't able to get there. 92 students, so 92 kids died, and 3 nuns died. Nuns were the teachers there, so 3 of their teachers died. So 95 people died in this fire. Absolutely tragic. When you go to school, you do not expect for 92 of your classmates to die that day. This would be absolutely devastating. And when people die, this many people die, especially children die, we make changes, and we made a lot of very good changes. And we have not had any large loss of life fires since this one in schools. So they removed grandfathering clauses, no more. Every school was required to have a sprinkler. We actually have a school in Edmond. It's a Boulevard Academy that it was built without a fire sprinkler, and they had to go back in and put a fire sprinkler in it retroactively. They made some rules about stairwells, some fire codes about stairwells. They had to have doors that automatically close. That way, if there is a fire in the stairwell, the fire stays there. Also, stairwells are safe places during a fire. They have what's called fire separation, so they're built in a way to keep smoke and fire from coming into them or leaving them, I guess, for usually about 3 hours. So they are a safe place to be, is a stairwell, if for some reason you could never exit a building. So in this fire, school fire codes were overhauled throughout the nation, right? It even impacted all the way here into Edmond. It wasn't just where this fire occurred. We're going to fast forward now to 2003. This one happened in my lifetime. I don't remember it. I was only 6 years old. Sorry, I was not 6 years old, 16 years old. Having a little trouble with math today. I do not remember it. But this building, it was a nightclub. was not equipped with sprinklers due to an overlooked code requirement. So on the night of the fire, they should have had fire sprinklers, but they didn't. Some of the exits were obstructed, not only by this soundproof board, but also one of the exits was guarded by a security guard who actually prevented people from leaving during a fire. He was told not to let anybody exit out that exit, and he did that, and it cost a lot of people their lives. They were told they could only have 300 people in the building. Like we talked about earlier, they needed more money, so that night there was a concert. They let 462 people in the building. They had 4 exits, which probably would have been enough for 300 people, but not enough for 462. And also some of the exits were blocked. This is a picture of the fire, and we're actually going to watch a video on this next slide of it because it was recorded. Somebody caught it on camera. So the band used illegal fireworks inside. And as you can imagine, fireworks inside of a building are a horrible idea. They claim that the building owner told them they could. The fire department never asked the fire department, never gave them permission. And this picture actually was captured right after the fire was ignited, and it really sort of captures just the craziness of how unsafe this was. So you got a box of fireworks there. It's labeled 1.4 explosives, which is just the classification for fireworks. You got a guy that's smoking a cigarette right next to him. He's about to grab the box. The band and many people are just looking. They don't know what to do because of this fire. They're just in shock. It only took 1 minute. The whole stage was completely involved in flames. There was no emergency lights. Almost everybody tried to go out the front door. Remember, they had way too many people, so everybody was rushing, panicking, trying to get out the front door. They unfortunately got stuck at the front door. It only took 3 minutes. Remember I said how fast fire moves? And you're going to see this video. Now, I tell you, the club is fully engulfed within 3 minutes. And in your mind, you may think that still seems like a lot of time to get out. But I'm going to show you this video, and I want you to see how fast that fire can move through a building. So 100 people were killed in this fire, 230 were injured. So let's watch the video now. Real quick on the video, it was actually, it is on YouTube. If you choose to, you could watch the full thing. I'm just going to show you just about 3 minutes of it. And originally they took it down, the video, but then they left it, they put it back up just to show how fast fire can spread. So let's watch it. There are the fireworks. As you can see, when you come back, go back.
On February 20th, 2003, 100 people lost their lives and 230 were injured in one of the deadliest nightclub fires in U.S. history. The fire was caused by pyrotechnics that were set off as the band Great White began to play its opening song. The illegal indoor use of outside fireworks led to the igniting of highly flammable soundproofing foam in the walls of the stage. Within 30 seconds of the fire starting, the entire stage was engulfed. Most of the 462 occupants ran for the narrow hallway of the front entrance. The entryway soon became packed with terrified people all trying to leave at once. Some were trampled to death as the frightened crowd tried to escape the smoke and flames that were closing in behind them. In the chaos, the front door became a tangled mess of bodies as dozens of people piled on top of each other in a frenzied attempt to flee. Within 5.5 minutes, the entire club was engulfed in flames and hundreds of lives were lost and ruined. During the investigation, it was concluded that a fire sprinkler system would have contained the fire long enough for everyone to escape. Because of the building's age and size, it was thought to be exempt from sprinkler system requirements. However, the building had undergone changes that removed its exemption from the law, a fact fire inspectors never noticed. On the night of the fire, the club was legally required to have a sprinkler system, but did not. On December 9, 2003, Daniel M. Beachel, the former road manager.
So we're going to stop it there. And the video it's difficult to watch, but I think it's important. And I like to show it to people to reinforce several things. And one would be not only knowing one way out of the building. Remember, I said they had 4 exits. One of them was blocked by a security guard. So there was still 2 other exits, but nobody really tried to exit those other exits. And we are creatures of habit. And when we go in places, especially if we've never been there, we usually only know one way out, and that's the way that we came in the building. And I always encourage people, everywhere you go, take a look and try to find a second way out. It doesn't take any extra time because all you have to do is just look while you're walking for another exit sign. Like, I'm kind of crazy. Like, when I go to a Thunder game, I always look for like different ways to get out of the building, because I know that if there was to be a fire occur in the arena, that everybody's going to be trying to go down those big stairs, and it's going to be a mass chaos. And I'm going to be using a second way to get out. So I would encourage you, wherever you go, even if it's just like a grocery store, but especially if you go places with like a lot of people, what we call assemblies, so restaurants, clubs, movie theaters, those type of things, just know another way to get out. Because if many of those people in there would have known another way to get out, they may not have gotten stuck. Even though the fire just went super fast, a lot of people were in the back of the building as well, and they tried to exit the front of the building. And so I want to ask you, do you think if they had a sprinkler, would anybody have died? Or would that many people have died? And I can tell you my answer, and I can 100% for sure say that 0 people would have died if they had a fire sprinkler in that building. And that makes me take my job very seriously, because as they said, a fire inspector missed. They made a mistake. They should have required them to have a sprinkler. So a fire inspector could have prevented 100 people from dying. And the reason I can say that 0 people would have died is because they actually recreated this. They recreated the building, same materials, same fireworks, same foam board, and they lit it on fire to see what would happen. But the only difference is they put fire sprinklers in it. So let's watch it real quick. So the fire has ignited. First sprinkler went off at 24 seconds. And the second sprinkler went off around right then, about 30 seconds. So there is still a little bit of fire. It's above where the sprinkler can reach, but that's it. I'll just fast forward real quick so you can see 1 minute, 11 seconds in, you got just a very light haze of smoke. That's, I mean, you might be coughing, but you would be okay. And you're not going to have any heat also. So this fire absolutely survivable. Everybody would have made it out. Yeah, they would have been scared. People would have breathed in smoke. People might have got trampled, but nobody would have died because of the fire. So what did we learn from the station nightclub? Well, we learned a lot. New standard for sprinkler systems. They required them in the nightclubs. It didn't matter. Buildings, if you have over assemblies with over 100 people in them, they have to have fire sprinklers. Doesn't matter how old they are. Banned indoor fireworks, which, you know, common sense would have told you that wasn't a good idea already, but apparently they hadn't banned them at that point. They are now banned, although you can get permits for them. The fire department does grant permits. It just has to be done in a there's a lot of regulations on it, because you do see fireworks like even at like a Thunder game or a football game. And the egress system includes the exterior of the building. So when I say that, what that means is when those people got outside, one of the reasons why also everybody couldn't fit through those double doors is because the doors, when they opened, they kept people from walking out also. So it kind of just limited the space that people had to leave. People had to jump over the rail and stuff, which, you know, you shouldn't have to do at an exit, and especially if somebody's handicapped, they're not going to be able to do that. So this is sad. And at this point, you might be asking, what can we do to prevent this from happening here? Well, there's several things. There's stuff that we can do as a fire department, but we can't do everything. It takes you helping us as well. So some of the things that we do is we enforce the fire codes. Fire alarms are required in, you know, large after a certain size of building, they're required. Same with sprinklers. We do inspections to make sure that people are following the rules. Fire extinguishers, we haven't really talked a whole lot about those, but those are really vital in preventing fires from growing. Exit signs, emergency lights are required in almost every building, especially in newer buildings. Fire codes have come a long way in Edmond. How it started versus how it's going now. Well, January 22nd, 1892. This is a piece of trivia that very, very few people know. What is the very first fire code for the city of Edmond? Glad you asked. Every business owner must keep 2 barrels filled with water in front of each building, and they must be also filled with at least 1 peck of salt. Your homework assignment for tonight, find out what a peck of salt is. They also were required to keep a tin fire bucket. It was painted red. This was before they had fire trucks. So basically the water, the reason they put the salt in the water was so people wouldn't drink it. They'd roll these buckets of water to the fire, and then they'd use their bucket and they'd throw the water on the fire. Well, how's it going now? We've come a long way. Current Edmond fire codes. We've adopted in Edmond the 2015 version of the IFC International Fire Code, which is 554 pages. So we've come a long way. We got, you know, over 500 pages of fire codes now. Well, I got some bad news. We're not quite done with it. And yes, this is also an actual photo of me, in case you were wondering. You spend much more time at home than you do at school, going to the movies, going other places most of the time. And the greatest risk for you is at your house of a fire occurring. So for you to be safe at home, there's 3 simple things that you can do. The first one is have working smoke alarms. Over half of the people that die in fires do not have working smoke alarms in their home. The second is going to be plan and practice a home fire escape plan. Not just knowing one way out, knowing 2 ways out. I bet most of you go in and out of your house the same way every single day, whether it's to the front door, to the garage door, and in a panic, in a fire, you're going to try to do the same thing. Think about it. What would you do if you can't go through that main way? The last thing is to close your bedroom door before you go to sleep. So on smoke alarms, test them monthly, change your batteries at least once a year, and smoke alarms, they only actually last for 10 years. And there's no reason not to have smoke alarms. If you don't have them, whether you live in a house or apartment, talk to your parents or the adults you live with. And you can even call me and I'll provide them for free. We give out free smoke alarms to anybody who lives in Edmond, so there's no reason not to have them. Like I said, plan and practice your escape. It might be helpful to draw a map and actually practice it. So it's not enough just to think about it. You need to actually physically practice doing it, even going out your secondary exit, even if that means practicing going out a window. The last thing I want to talk to you about is closing your bedroom door before you go to bed or close before you doze. There's been a lot of science and research in this area, and closing your bedroom door, just a regular bedroom door, is one of the most effective ways that you can stay safe in your home while you're sleeping. Just a regular bedroom door can keep fire and smoke from coming into your bedroom for up to 10 or 15 minutes. And they've actually simulated this many times. And here's a video just showing how powerful and important it is to close your bedroom door before you go to sleep.
We're here at the Delaware County Emergency Services Training Center in Pennsylvania, where we're repurposing one of our test fixtures to do a demonstration for Fire Prevention Week on the importance of closing your door. This year's theme, Close Before You Doze, will let us highlight the importance of putting that important barrier between you and the potential fire before you go to sleep at night. We're going to have an experiment where we're going to light the fire in the living room, cutting off your main source of egress. We're going to see how long it takes those smoke alarms to go off to give you that early warning, and look at what important role that the closed door plays in providing you time to be woken, understand what's happening around you, decide whether or not you can get out safely or not, and ultimately, if you can't, the important protection that it provides you to buy you time so the fire department can come and rescue you. In this 3-bedroom house, what's important to us is how long the occupants would have to survive. In order to determine that, we've got temperature measurements at every foot in every room in the house. We've got oxygen, carbon monoxide, and carbon dioxide measurements in the bedrooms as well as the hallway to understand what the potential occupants would be exposed to, along with our regular measurements of pressure, video, thermal imaging throughout the house so we can quantify the fire behavior. We're going to start the fire by lighting a sofa with the candle in the living room. That fire is going to begin to spread across the sofa, filling the house with smoke and heat. That smoke is going to begin to bank down. What we're looking at is the obvious difference in conditions between the open bedroom and the closed bedrooms and what that means for occupant survival time. We're going to allow that fire to progress, and we're going to be watching the front windows to the living room. The question to us is going to be, are those front living room windows going to fail or not? That fire is going to become ventilation limited. The windows are going to go out. We're going to have fire out of the front of the house, and we're going to continue to look at how that deteriorates conditions inside the house. Once we have that fire out the windows and things are not survivable in the open bedroom, we're going to have our suppression crew go ahead and move in, put the fire out.
So I want to leave it on the screen for a second. This is after the fire that had their bedroom door closed. Peak temperature was 100 degrees Fahrenheit. Do you think you can survive 100 degrees Fahrenheit? Well, yeah, you can. You live in Oklahoma. We're used to it, right? The other thing to keep in mind is carbon monoxide. The other room was 6,000 parts per million. That was enough that it would kill you instantly. 600 parts per million, however, that is enough that while you couldn't endure it forever, you would definitely have a headache, you would still be able to survive staying in that room. So in summary, always have a plan, no matter where you go, a friend's house, restaurants, movie theater, sporting events, church, mall, even just going shopping, have a backup plan, know a second way to get out. We always think that it can never happen to us, and I hope it never does, but it can. So if you are prepared, it won't happen to you. Each year, thousands of people die due to preventable fires. Yes, fire codes have improved a lot, as we learned today, but they're often ignored, unfortunately, by business and building owners. It shouldn't take a loss of life to create change. So better is not good enough. If you guys have any questions, let your teacher know. You can send them to me. I'd be happy to answer them via video or email, whatever you prefer. Thank you.